Hello, folks. This is a female ENTP resembler, whereas, oh, let's click on him. That is a male ENTP resembler, Russian branch, talking about how his fellow Russians want to use mirrors on satellites to light up entire cities in Russia's north during polar nights. A very ENTP idea. Don't hold your breath. But the Soviet Union did try it as an experiment. Now we can settle down and get on topic, which is the ModelG ENTP profile in a nutshell. This video will probably be over an hour long, so I guess this big explanation will be in a nutshell that is coconut sized. Now everyone will understand the title of the video, because I've had people in the past not understand it. Right. I will, so Joe, you were asking about the switch between, like, one of the two questions you're asking about. One was the social adaptation block. We'll look at that later, folks. But we're going to, because one of the big things in Model G is the switch. So I do hope I'm clicked on the correct square. So necessarily just when okay, I'll be all right now. So we have here. Now this may be some bias. This is from Wikisocion. And so it says there, in his work, he described, he didn't quite say 2 functions per type, at least not in psychological types, aka the psychology of individuation, which is my preferred title. So, what I'll show you what he actually did say. Oh, I'll just make a quick point. There is a myth that Carl Jung didn't have JP. Like the MBTI created it. Well, there it is. So JP is a thing. Right there.
What is that from?
This is from Psychological Types.
Oh, okay.
Oh, and to make another contrast between the male and female ENTP, there's a famous male ENTP. In fact, because Carol Linden's not here, I'll actually say who his name is. John Beebe. He was interviewed by Type Tips, and he said that Carl Jung only wrote 1 line about the auxiliary function. Well, I've measured this 1 line, and it's nearly 3 meters long. So, but anyhow, we're getting back on topic because there's a lot to get through. So this is where, so it's saying there, it serves the lead function. The one thing he says, does he say it's, right, okay, there's a bit here. Yeah, that's it. I know I'm bumbling around at the minute, folks, but there's sort of like 2 ways of looking at this. It's when he says here that the auxiliary function is, which is in every respect different from the nature of the main function. That would make you think that MBTI is correct. Because, so for example, Joe, in your case, you lead with an extroverted perceiving function, and the auxiliary function is an introverted rational function. And so that's 2 differences, vertness and rationality, irrationality. But when he then goes on to describe the types, he's very specific about the lead function, but non-specific about the auxiliary function. So, for example, practical intellect, for instance, paired with sensation. I'm assuming that's TE, practical intellect. And then the second one is speculative intellect breaking through with intuition. It doesn't state whether it's NE or NI. It just says with intuition. And then here's one for Jonathan. He's talking about you, Jonathan. The artistic intuition which selects and presents its images by means of feeling judgment. Now, usually, if you were going to write that, to get a better grammatical flow, you would write a feeling judgment. But he's not even restricted it to 1. So it's like he's sitting on the fence there between FI and FE. And then here we go. This is for INTJ, and I can prove that a little bit. The philosophical intuition, which, in league with a vigorous intellect, again, he's not been specific whether it's TI or TE, translates its vision into the sphere of comprehensible thought. He could have called it Now, given that he described TE as practical intellect, he could have said that the auxiliary function was practical intellect, couldn't he? For INTJ. So it's specific about the lead function, but not the auxiliary function.
I'm sorry. Did you say the artistic intuition which selects and presents as images is INFJ?
Yeah.
Because why is that INFJ and the philosophical intuition INTJ then?
Well,
shouldn't that be that the artistic intuition is ENFP or NE maybe? Possibly.
You are right. You are right. It could be. It could be the two It could be the two extinguishment types. You are right there, Jonathan.
Yes.
But yes, you are right. You see, this is why I invited Jonathan at the extra insightfulness, and he keeps me on my toes. Now, in case of this one here, he probably is talking about the INTJ type because here he is talking about Nietzsche. And so I'll let Jonathan comment on this. I don't know if Joe has read any Nietzsche.
No.
Right. I'll ask you, Jonathan, does that make sense for Nietzsche? Because Carl Jung, German speaker.
I don't know. That is just must be characterized as his own person. Yes. She eminently intuitive, the artistic manager. Yeah, he's definitely. Yeah, I mean that's fine. My comment is that's fine.
Yeah, I remember having a discussion with you, and I would trying to because Victor thinks that Nietzsche was ENFJ. Let's just say Victor has some idiosyncratic typings, and yes. I was making the case because if you go completely by quadras, you would say, "Oh, Nietzsche, he sounds so beta. Surely that would make him INFJ." But then I had a discussion with Jonathan. He was like, "Come off it. He's so effy. He's so effy break." So I'll let you look at that, Jonathan, and get your comments on that, and then I'll bring it back to the auxiliary function.
Well, what kind of comments are you looking for? Because
do you think that fits him? This analysis that he had.
I would say it's a fairly respectable analysis of Nietzsche. Yes,
because it does appear that Nietzsche, like Dario Nardi, has a thing for extroverted sensing. Right. Although Dario is far healthier. Right. So what I'm going to do is I'll go back to this bit, and then I'll talk about. So we got here. I'll say there's a vigorous intellect, and of course, a vigorous intellect is a combination of TI and TE. So as not to overwhelm Joe, before talking about the model, what we're going to do is we're just going to really drill down on this thing about why Victor has switched it around. Because I've got a lot of... Because usually this is like the biggest case that I have to make with people, because it's like the biggest obstacle when telling... So I'll let you look through that, Joe, as to how people are good at the demonstrative function, even when they don't value it.
Yeah, that you did send me that one, so I did take a glance at it earlier as well.
Right. Do you agree with it?
I've definitely heard, and I see the agreement on it. Even before getting into socionics, I know an INTP quite well, and there was always that being good at NI and kind of questioning where that's coming from if it's not one of the valued functions. Things like that. Like, it seems to make sense, and but I didn't know exactly where that came from or like how that kind of came about.
No,
it's until very recently. It
might be because I'm an NE subtype, I reckon. What does that look like? The INTP being good at NI.
It's hard for me to identify. Ignoring. Not my. Oh, Maria's here. I mean, it's funny. I think that's why sometimes you get INTPs who do type as because sometimes you'll see people who are into MBTI but not socionics. They say, oh, like the P and the J, like all the functions are different. Like, I don't know how you can mistype that way, but like in fact, going by this, it would make a lot of sense that INTPs could sometimes seem like INTJs or have some of the qualities. I think that it definitely covers, yeah, a lot of this like holes in just kind of generic MBTI theory.
But like, to be honest, I don't look at the MBTI profiles. I look at the profiles written by Dario Nardi and the Keirsey ones. And I've got to say that I am loving Dario's 8 Keys to Self-Leadership book. It is so good because it just gives you so much to think about and like make connections with socionics. And of course, Dario doesn't know about socionics, but it's like, so for instance, when at the back he writes things like, and in fact, this is relevant to this hangout. Although really I should cover it later on, and I'll probably cover it again. People have an overall preference for either introverting or extroverting. So like it gives you that thing like for the externalities row where they're all of the same vertness. So for extroverts, they're all extroverted functions in the externalities row. So that's a point of agreement. But anyway, we'll talk about that later. So you've looked at this. Now, when I asked Dario about this, he thinks that I'll just quieten Maria until she wants to speak. Right, because she's good at, and whenever she turns her mic on, then I shut up and listen. So that, when I asked Dario about this, he thinks that it depends on the level of development. And so he gave the example of the INTP that does too much NE. Now, you will get the impression from this book that Dario is not the hugest fan of NE because he loves extroverted sensing so much in terms of staying in the present context, and he sees NE as moving away from the present context and doing the trans-contextual thinking and being random. And when I asked Dario about that, but we're not random. And then he said, well, Linda says the same thing. And then Dario said, but everybody else who's not an MP sees it that way. They see it as being random. And look at Jonathan nodding there.
It's not. There's nothing random about it.
We see the connections. And then Jonathan might say, yes, but we see the future.
Oh, well, that's fancy.
Yeah. Right, so the next one is, I think this is right. Oh, yes, this is from Victor's. Oh, yes, this is correct. So this is from, I don't know if you looked at the, I don't know if I sent you this. No, I don't think I did. Right, so this is Victor saying, I'll let you read through that and comment on it.
Oh, I need to read more Talanov.
Oh, I've not read any of him.
I've just started looking into some of Talanov's work. Not much. More some of my friends who are into socionics and are much more well versed than I am. But yeah, I know I definitely should.
I do think it's, first of all, NI is so darn hard to like understand, and even if you like. And if you look at Keirsey with the NTJs, they're always like good at the serial cause and effect. But from my point of view, when I work out cause and effect, I think I'm doing it with TI. So I can't really see the NI in action. So it's like, and I always use this metaphor, so please forgive me, it's the INTP fish doesn't know it's wet with NI. So I always use that metaphor. Right, so you've got this code here. I can see what it means about the entrepreneur, about them taking risks. But we could also say that that is the tertiary function in ENTJs. Well, what is the... Right then, okay. So you've had a look at that. Any comments on that, Joe?
On which part? On the entrepreneur?
Yeah,
section?
or even now I would say for Victor, I'll just have a comment on this one. For me, I find it natural to go to the NE mode. But that might be a subtype thing, and you've looked into DCNH.
Oh,
So,
that's probably one of my favorite parts.
And I actually think that DCNH is very good at, if only we could actually look at the profiles, like the DCNH profiles of like is sensory introverts, because then like the normalizing ones might sound a bit more guardian, and the creative ones might sound a bit more ISTP and ISFP, because there's a lot of commonalities between the artisan, which is like even the word artisan is someone who's being a creative, and then the creative subtype, and then when you've got normalizing, and then the guardians who like to be normal, and they're 45% of the population, and all of these kind of things. So I don't know if you watched the DCNH Hangouts, where I was like trying to press that point, but in a gentle way. So I said things like, is the number of normalizing subtypes about 45%? To see if it was like the same number as SJs.
That's actually interesting. I don't know if I saw that one. I have watched a couple of them because I stayed up doing hours and hours of DCNH research recently. I don't know what for, but I was up until 7 a.m.
Wow. You are an NTP. Right.
I do that a lot.
Right. Okay, what do you think of the bit about the entrepreneur?
I'm trying to relate it because my father is ENTJ.
Yeah.
And I always assumed that sort of the riskiness was from SE. That was the assumption I'd made. But
my personal opinion is that the NE spots the opportunities, and the SE likes to take the risks, because it's like the ENTJs really have got that thing for extroverted sensing, because in my opinion, it's like it's part of that thing with them being competitive, because a lot of ENTJ, because when I read Keirsey's ENTJ profile, it just screamed Enneagram Type 3 at me, like wanting this objective success, all that. I mean, not power for power's sake, but wanting success, but they will use power in order to move people to get efficiency up, to get the results. And so them being competitive, that's a large part of extroverted sensor. So I can see that.
I definitely noticed that. My mother and father are ESTP and ENTJ, so there definitely is an element of that ST competitiveness, and especially with the SE, you can definitely see the power versus just purely efficiency from the TE.
Ah, interesting. Very interesting. Does your mother also happen to be Enneagram Type 8?
Yeah, I think so. I think they both are. I don't remember tri-type or anything. They have the same job. Sales in different companies, they have the same job. They compete on salaries, money, who makes more, who's taking home. I don't know how they do it.
We'll have to talk about this in future, but my personal theory, Jonathan's got a different point of view, but my personal theory is that the 8 is about control, the 3 is about success, and so the ENTJ is about success, because that goes with the extroverted thinking and the business logic. Whereas it's not power for power's sake. And you know how Socionics defines extroverted sensing as power sensing? Now, Dario's definition of extroverted sensing is a lot more nuanced. And not just because he loves the function so much, but he actually puts on page 17. So he talks about immersing yourself in the present context, all that kind of stuff. But right at the end, he says, and this is for like the best use of extroverted sensing, he actually puts, at some point, they are ready to engage the process in its most mature form, pulling off results and spurring action from others simply by making their presence felt. Now, to me, making their presence felt conjures up images. But that's me being SE break. It conjures up images of people, moving around with their body language and intimidating people. Right. Right, we got to move on a little bit. So, this is excellent. Good job, Victor, did a So I'll let you go through this. So this is a summary of all the alphas and how they use the Gulenko creative function. I like it how he's got ESFJs. He makes them have fun. It's like Gladys Emanuel in Heidi High, which was a holiday camp. She wakes everybody up in the morning. Hello, campers. And so it's like, you've got to get up and have fun. And it's like at regulated times. Get up, have your breakfast now, and then we've got all these fun activities.
That sounds terrible.
I know, they actually said, he actually tried to move the same concept to the United States, but the Americans wouldn't have it. This idea of like a holiday camp. But you can see from their point of view that they would want everyone to get up at the same time, so they can all have their food at the same time, and then move things around. It was something that happened. It was a 1950s idea, Joe, and people in England were, you know, just happy for anything they could get. Right, so I'll let you go through this and consider it. And if you think Victor's gone out on a limb, don't you mind you saying that, because I sometimes say that as well.
Oh, I've gotten mixed up on the sort of nicknames on them. That's what it was.
Oh, right, okay.
Just because of enthusiast, that gets pegged to Enneagram 7 a lot, so I see it a lot with EPs. So the terminology mixed me up a little bit.
Yeah, I don't really know why he's... Wait a minute. Ah, I know why. It's because if like he's got the launcher function as like NE, and so you've got like the NEFE. I can see it though. I mean, if you don't know Elena Ames Hagbar, but on her Facebook and like on her videos, she's like posting videos where she acts like an ENFP. Like, you know, dresses up.
I don't doubt it. I just I see the crossover sometimes, so I get mixed up.
Yeah. Also, you know, it's a little bit of maybe bias. Like we INTPs, we love the ESFJ, so you know, it's how we see them.
Yeah, I mean, I think at least for the ENTPs, it definitely sounds about right. I mean, maybe depending on subtype, I don't know about making them work. I usually abandon them before that point, but
yeah, it's usually more the ones with stronger extroverted sensor.
Make them work in my head.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, I would say that Victor does, because of the way the model works. He overemphasizes the creative function and underemphasizes the demonstrative function. But Maria would probably say, "Oh, Ben, you need to see the subtype profiles," but unfortunately, they're not available to the general public because
I'd love to see individual subtype profiles.
You will have to pay in order to see them because you know Victor needs to earn a living, so. He has these under wraps, but Maria has actually seen them, so she said they're good. Comfortable relationships, I can see that with ISFJ, SIFX. Just a little bit of functional determinism there. Right, and then structural logic with intuition of time. So logic of time, structure of time. Okay. There's not really much. Any comments on that? I've not really got much to say about that.
Yeah, it seems to be one of the more lackluster descriptions compared to the enthusiast.
Yeah, I mean, this was just the video description on YouTube for the Hangout. Oh, what's this one for? Oh yes, this is. This is my own personal. My own personal view of the creative function. I call it the creative shadow. In that the shadow is both a source of creativity, and it has like a dark side. So, can you see that clearly enough, or do I need to zoom in?
Oh, I can see it. It works.
Right. I'll let you read through that and opine on it.
That's definitely true with the INTPs and INFPs, especially when it comes to philosophy. I've lived with two of them, like one of each at the same time, and that that's very true, especially the logocentrism.
Ooh. Joe knows what that word means. NTP points.
It's more extrapolation from the roots of them, but I'll pretend I know it all.
Well,
Selfish about money when they go wrong. Materialistic. I would like to deny that, but unfortunately, I will not deny that at all.
where did I put that for material? Oh, yes. No, okay, yes. Yeah. Just for those people who don't know. Now, it's a while since I read the concept about logocentric, but it's like a postmodern critique of too much TI, where it's like you believe the word absolutely, completely, 100% represents the truth. And so I think the logos is like the truth. Control D will switch your mic on and off, so it's a quicker shortcut. Right. Right, so, okay, you've done that with the EPs. Okay, here we go. ESFP and ENFP. I think that's the case.
That's straight. Yeah, that is kind of interesting, especially maybe not ESFPs. I don't see it, but there's the stereotype with ENFPs. You know, like, oh, they don't have FE, but you also see them being very good with people more so than ENTPs, for example. Even though we tend to value our FE. But,
Well,
but I think that's interesting if it fits the creative shadow.
Well, the way to manipulate an ESFP is, well, what I would say what pickup artists do is they will engineer a situation in which they make the woman think that the woman has seduced them. I know that sounds weird, but it's like, because the SP is like the chase and they like the drive. So it's a little bit of a weird situation. Because the SPs don't like people being forward, because it's like it's no challenge for them. The SPs, especially the SE DOMs, they like to be the chasers. Right. So maybe that is part of it. Maybe it's, but I do agree with what you say. That, and Jeff's talked about this when he does his line. ESFPs are just like, no, ENFPs are just like ESFPs, except the ENFPs believe in stuff. That ESFPs are more skeptical. But I suppose they could be manipulated once they're fallen in love. But before that, but then again, anyone who's fallen in love can be manipulated.
Yeah. Could be a little universal.
Yeah, I'm just trying to like get some. But now what I'm going to talk about is like the best example I can give of, and this is from the Keirsey ESFP profile. Now I actually did this, and I put this in the Keirsey group. Now the Keirsey group, you're banned from mentioning functions. So what I did is I rather sneakily did this in sort of like form of positions 1, 2, and 5 in ModelG for like ESFP, and it doesn't quite match up, but this does match up for the creative function. So I'll ask you, Joe. Oh, I shouldn't have done that. I should have just asked you at the front. So these are all quotes from the Kersey ES profile. So forget what I said. Has my sound gone weird?
Sorry, what were you asking? You cut out a little bit. You went a little robotic.
I'm glad I cut out, because I almost put... So I'll say about that. Which function does that sound like, those quotes?
Somebody says in the former. That's interesting. Yeah, that would make sense, because it does sound like FE, or like,
right.
You know, the very shallow definition of it.
Yeah. And so that's all in the Kersey ESFP profile. But what I would say is, the way Victor defines the creative function, again, it's used to implement, it's used as a tool to implement the program, and the program being the lead function. And so we can say in ESFPs that, well, I would say a lot of them are using FE in order to get attention, and so that they want to have harmony, so they can be part of the group, so they can have attention on them. If they annoy everyone, they're gonna be ostracized. So part of it is like keeping the crowd of people around them happy. Now, but I will also say, and Jeff has talked about kindness in the SFP as being instinctive, and I've talked to, I almost said a surname. I talked to Kristin. I try not to say women's surnames. I talked to Kristin about this, and she identifies as ISFP, and she said that she likes to do the charity work, but not as an obligation, but when she wants to do it as an instinct, not as an obligation. And so with this kindness as an instinct, you can see how, because quite a few ESFPs, can fit the Enneagram 2 pattern. And that would surprise a lot of people, if just going off the function, say an MBTI, you'd go, why would I do that? They're all about all about wanting attention for themselves. But no, they can do the Enneagram 2 thing. And so maybe that's like the creative FE, or maybe it's just an instinct. It's hard to tell. Oh, yes.
Sneaky.
Did you say thinky?
I said sneaky.
Oh, right, okay. It is hard to... Oh, yeah, so what I was thinking about this is, if you think of... So ENFPs are going to have this as well. They're going to show these skills, but they're going to use these skills, especially if they're enacting the role of champion, advocator. They're going to use these skills in order to, put forward their ideas. Say if they've got, a particular cause, then they're going to use their emotional expressiveness in order to, put them forward, to promote them. So, like I said, so if it's not attention, so the ENFP would be, I think I've written down there, oh yes, idealist champion employed similar means towards their idealist rather than artisan performer goals. Right, in order to champion a cause via people skills. Right.
I actually have a question.
Go on then.
So with FE serving ESFPs this way, I think it was TE you mentioned with business, with ENTPs. Would that also sort of account for why you see a lot of the ENTP profiles mentioning lots of business sense and entrepreneurship?
Yeah.
Would that be part of what contributes to that?
Also, Keirsey called them the inventor. So of course, when you've invented something, you've not only just got to invent it, it's then... And especially these days, it's not like 300 years ago where you could invent it yourself. These days, you've got to come up with a design for it, patent it, and then try and get backers in order to build it, because of the level of technological complexity. And just for example, the guy Dyson that invented the Dyson vacuum cleaner, have you heard of that? Joe? So it took him he had to go through a load of prototypes in order to eventually get to it. And of course that requires money. So all the business, TE, business logic, practical thinking. So yeah, you can see how those two can go together. When
even execution really.
Yeah. But I personally think it relates to subtype. Because you are a lot of ENTPs that are not interested in the TE. They go into and do philosophy courses. I mean, I listen to the PEL podcast. That's I've forgotten what it is full. I forgot what PL is. Yeah, the PL podcast. And one of the guys on there, Mark Linsenmeyer, is definitely an ENTP, and he's into moral relativism. Yes, Jonathan.
Is PL Podlayer?
Oh no, not Podlayer. It's the PEL. If you just type in PEL podcast, you'll be able to, because I've forgotten what it's an initialism for. It's some philosophy something. Oh, I'll have a look on my...
The partially examined life.
That's it, the partially examined life, that's it.
Yeah. I want to know. Now I know.
Yeah. And so they go over a lot of philosophers on there, and they do it in a fun way. And basically they all talk about how they just did it at university as a fun thing. and it's really hard to become a philosophy professor because you have a load of people who come out of these courses with a philosophy degree, and the only thing they're really qualified to do is become a philosophy professor. And they were talking about this guy that spent like 10 years doing like his PhD and other things, and only just now is he getting tenureship, and that's at some really obscure university in Idaho. So, you know. Anyhow, so moving forward. So, and as we know, a lot of ENTPs fit the Enneagram 7 pattern. And so it's loads of ideas all over the place, and they're not. So we could say a very high percentage of inventors are ENTP, but a very small percentage of ENTPs are inventors. Just as
that makes sense.
just as every type, a very small percentage are inventors. Whereas INTPs, they just like to invent a theory. And so that's what's good about Keirsey, is like with like the mirror pairs, it's very good at showing their role enactments and how close they are. Right, here we go. The next one. Oh my gosh. Right, you've read through this. So this is my little summary of Model G. I won't tell you where. Anyway, I won't talk about that. So you read about this. So anything pop into your mind? I'll let you have a look at it again.
No, my main question was just more about the social mission and adaptation block. Just mostly because a lot of the explanations I kind of see tend to be, they either need more context in the material that like whoever's talking about it is authored, or they kind of need some other. They just need more context, or they kind of differ between what sources I'm looking at.
Right. So Joe, do we have at least another 90 minutes?
Another 90, probably not.
At least another 60?
I could do about 50 to 60.
Okay, so I better move forward. Right, so folks, you can see that. You can pause the screen, take that in. We need to move forward. So this is Victor talking about stuff. Right, and again, folks, you've got to move forward. So you can pause that. Think about it yourselves. Because we've got to move forward. Because I'm going to be explaining this anyway when we get to the actual graphic. Right, so there. I'll just move that down. There you go. There's a just hand drawn, as you can tell.
I might need a couple of copies of those last two or three slides if you can send them to me later.
Okay.
Not right now.
So the thing is though, Victor grew up in the Soviet Union, and probably in the Soviet Union for, we're in about 50 years, so about 30 years. This may be, I mean, Victor, you don't have to toe the socialist line anymore, saying that society is more important than the individual, because that's what is written there. The socion is more important than the individual. So, you know, maybe that's what the socionics people had to say. Like, we don't want our funding cut. You can imagine what would happen if they came out with a system that said the individual is more important than society. They'd get closed down. So we'll look at that. Because, okay, this is the tote model. Victor just sort of used this as a metaphor, because it's like, well, all these other models have a 4-step model. Why can't I have one? So therefore, Model G can have a 4-step model. So you can pause that, folks. Think about it yourselves. Right, and then we're gonna, because we need to move on. Okay, this is about. Why did I put this in? I can't remember, but it's good stuff. This is Keirsey talking about NTJs. And so you can see how he's got NI, and he's sort of like, well, what does that look like? What does NI look like in NTs when it's strong? Well, they're good at the serial planning. Is that fair enough to say? And then we've got the NTPs are good at configuring systems in which things happen at the same time. Right. I don't know why I brought this up. There was a good reason for bringing it up. It's slightly tangential, but there we go. NTJs again. Consecutive steps, sequence, knowing what's needed to achieve long-term goals, seeing how things are going to progress. and then constructing of models, constructing of prototypes. So you can see how the NTPs are similar. Right, and then you've got the role enactment. Ah, right, that's probably why. Yes, that was it. Social mission. It's similar to the social mission, isn't it? Where you've got, like, you've got mechanical devising. Although Victor has it as the analyst, and Keirsey has it as the designer or architect. So it's like the designer or architect of theories. So, I mean, I do think that's a better name than analyst, because it's not like INTPs just analyze something. They also come up with their own theories. And Victor has come up with a hell of a lot of his own theories. So, mechanical devising, again, the inventor. So that's like the NETE. And apparently, Victor got the idea. Well, what it said on a website, I don't know if it's true, but Victor read Please Understand Me, and he got the idea for calling the types by their sort of like role variants. And so that's why he calls them like these names rather than the nicknames, the historical nicknames. Right, so, oh, and even some of them even have the same name. So, for instance, he calls, Keirsey calls the supervisor the administrator. Well, he says the administrator to the STJs. And then also, and Victor also calls it the administrator. But we've got to move on. We have only 50 minutes. Darn it. Right, okay. It looks like my mod. So I originally did it in paper, and then I sent this to Victor. It looks like he's used it in one of his videos. But the reason why it's fancy and good is that an INTJ helped me. Now, this does actually contain a little bit of an error, because this box is a different shade from all the other ones. But that's recently been corrected. Right, okay, this is stuff that's on my channel. We're not going to go over that, but there's all of these playlists, folks. Look at that. All these playlists that people should look at their homepage. Right, next one. Are we going to get there? Oh, you'll like this, Joe. Intertype relations, because you like those, don't you? In ModelG. How to actually find them by looking. Now, I did this for my type, and so you can just carry it forward. So if you want to find your extinguishment, then you look at the 8 and then the 5. So it would be NI, NITI, which would be INTJ. Because that's the other one that leads with intuition and then thinking. Right.
I like this one because I have most of them by memory, not by how they actually come about.
Right, we have to move on. This is the ModelG Socion, and this has been cut and pasted together with like literally cut and pasted. Like you can see the gaps where I've like cut it with scissors and like joined it up. So because I moved the gamma quadra from the bottom left to the bottom right, because then it goes better with the forms of cognition. Have you looked at the forms of cognition? Right. So as you can see, now I don't think Victor said that he has the left spinners, but I have the left spinners going anti-clockwise or counterclockwise, as you Merkins call it, and then I have the right spinners going clockwise. Anyway, forms of cognition is for a future hangout, and I'll just zoom it in so that folks can look at the correlations I've made with the Keirsey names. So there you go, folks. You can pause it, look at that, and like I said, LSI doesn't correlate, so I've not. So in fact, it doesn't correlate so much. I've used the Gulenko codes. Right.
Why is it that one that's so different?
Why is it so different? Because this one is very much like the ISTJ, when functionally it's supposed to be the ISTP. Oh, your sound's cut out.
Oh dear.
Oh, you're back now. Right. Right. And then ESI as well is very different, although people assure me that the creative subtype is probably more like ISFP. And of course, I went over this with Bradley, the master, the SLI, and we went over it, and it was like, I suggested it was like 2/3 ISTJ, and Bradley said, oh, 3/4 ISTJ, when we went through it all. So again, it's a mixed bag. So in future, Joe, we could go over these profiles and explain to the audience why they were a little bit idiosyncratic.
That'd be interesting. I like this chart.
All right, thank you. It's worth all the effort. Now, it took flipping ages to do all the lines. Like, to make sure it's absolutely straight with the ruler.
Did you use a ruler, or did you try to freehand it?
I used the ruler.
Oh, okay.
Because if I freehand it, it comes out rubbish. Right, now this is... Oh, right. This, actually, we should get towards that later, because that's the... Okay. This is what the original explanation looked like before Scott Carrick helped me out. And then that shows you what the original. Right, so now we're going to actually... And then this is the thing that Victor said to me. And I was like, what? Right, but I worked out what was what. So now we're going to look at the model with about 40 minutes left. Right. All right, here we go. So, externalities. So, I'll now read out that thing that Dario said at the back of his book, based on his research. Right, here we go. So, see that some support from Dario. This was written in 2005. Model G wasn't even the glint in the eye of Victor Gulenko at that point, I don't think. People with an introverted dominant process do more introverted activities overall, particularly basic ones. For example, someone who most prefers introverted feeling will likely report moderate comfort with basic introverted intuiting, such as having sudden aha insights they can trust, and moderate comfort with basic introverted sensing, such as reviewing lots of information over time to confirm a set standard. Conversely, people with an extroverted dominant process tend to do more basic extroverted activities overall. And it makes sense because they're extroverts, they're out in the world, and those processes are externally based. Just like if someone's an introvert and they're in their head, then they're going to be subjective and say a lot of issues that, say, FINX and TINX think about, they're going to flip between PI and FI. And they're also going to do SI as they remember things, and you've got that subjective sensor. And then there's also, as we talked about before, the NI that you can get. So, for instance, FISX and TISX can have strong NI and go into a loop, strong tertiary NI. So that's MBTI, ISTP, and ISFP can have very strong NI. And in fact, Jung, the co-creative NLP, is ISTP, and it's always talking about hypnosis, which is so much to do with the unconscious. What am I talking about? I'm talking about NI and introverts. And so even the SI DOMs can switch to NI with the role function. And then we talked about the ones who are NI creative, INFP and INTP. And then, of course, we've got the ones that lead with NI. So what do you think of that idea, Joe, that all extroverts are pretty good at all the extroverted functions, or good enough at all the extroverted functions?
I'm not sure. I wonder if that could be possibly subtype variant, because I wouldn't say I particularly excel. I struggle most with SC and FE personally. Yeah, a lot. But that could be also with me being at any creative subtype.
Really?
That could have something to do with it. Which I think it has I think it's accentuation of SC and FE as well. Yet I seem to kind of struggle with that, or rely so heavily on any. But Overall, I could see that being a thing. Especially, I think I find it more so with introverts being better with their introverted functions and less so with extroverts. That's my personal observation, though.
Sorry, did you say you were the NE creative subtype?
Yes.
Because
Oh,
I think,
creative as in DCNH, Jonathan.
oh, okay.
DCNH.
All
Yes.
right, my apologies. Maybe something else.
You're fine.
You reminded me of something there, Joe, and it's actually a key concept. Well, you see, the thing is, ModelG is so good at making you come up with your own stuff. Like if you're like an NTP, you'll look at ModelG and you make your own connections and sort of like make ModelG your own in a way. So, for example, I was thinking about how best to explain externalities and internalities. And if we compare FE between you and me, I would say that the ENTP has a greater scope of use of FE. So the scope of use, and as an externality, all the externality functions tend to have a greater scope of use, whereas the functions in the lower row they can be powerful, but they have a smaller scope of use. So, for example, we're both NE creative.
More concentrated?
Subtypes. Yeah, like it can be more concentrated. So, for example, your NE has a greater scope of use than usually mine. Although in these Hangouts, my NE comes out. So it's just this thing of like scope of use. And so I suppose the classic example is when Victor talked about FE in the INTP. When Victor talked about FE in the INTP, he talked about how they can be expressive if they're talking about a subject that they're interested in. So again, it's limited. It's got a small scope of use. You smiled there with a note of recognition. Would you like to comment on that?
Oh, just very big into like Dungeons and Dragons and tabletop games, and so the INTP I'm with, I recognize the exact FE sort of lighting up and like all the Indian FE whenever he's on that particular subject. You know, talking about the intricacies of like game design, and it's just, I mean, it's everywhere. And then as soon as you move topics, it's back to the very mellow INTP facade. Yeah,
if they're not interested in the subject, it's like
it's on and off.
Yeah.
It's just.
Whereas, so for ENTPs, you can say the overall scope of use, the scope of use of their. So, for instance, a libertarian might say, let's have a discussion about the size and scope of government. So we can say the size and scope of the use of a function. So, like I said, ENTPs are going to show FE its scope of use. Whether it's stronger or not is a different question. Right. Because I would argue that, yeah, that's a different question. Especially the way Victor writes the ENTP profile, which is arguably a little bit naughty. We'll look at that later on. A little bit critical. So, right, so we've got here externalities. So people can read that on the left. I don't need to read it out. They can read that for themselves. And they can also read the... So, Joe, on the screen, have you got any questions about that block on screen? Right, very good. Right, now, because you wanted to know about social adaptation. I was thinking about this last night. No, not last night. ENFPs. ENFPs have role SE. And so they have a problem. If we use Dario's definition of SE, it actually makes this better. So you can say ENFPs have the problem of being not focused. And so if they go to their role function of be focused in the moment. So basically, if you're immersing yourself in the present context, there's another word for that, concentrating. You're just concentrating. So once an ENFP is concentrating on the environment, then I guess it's easier for the extroverted thinking to come into play. because you're concentrated. Okay, because you're concentrated on the present. Okay, what can I do with this? That's where the TE comes into play. So you can see getting an ENFP learning to concentrate is how they can learn to do the shift to the social adaptation block when their bubbly charm is not suitable for solving the task at hand. And then it's like then the ENFP. So the ENFP learns how to focus, and because they learn how to focus, it makes them think about the present situation. And because they're thinking about the present situation, maybe that makes them easier to get into the practical thinker. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Right. Now for you, maybe it would be, let's have a look. In fact, yes, we can let's mix this up a bit. I need to go, in fact, if I go to the next one. So I would say for you, then that would be, and what I have done in this graphic is I have made all of the valued functions in bold, all the unvalued ones in grey, just so folks don't get confused. Right. Now, so we're going to go with there's a bit of a lag effect. I hate lag. Right. So we'll talk about the social mission. So my theory would be, this makes sense. Like I said, ModelG is so good at making you come up with your own stuff. If an ENTP is more present, Joe, and they concentrate, do you think they'd be better at FE?
I'm sorry?
If it...
I just realized I was so busy reading the FE block. I was too busy reading it.
Right.
And when they actually focus.
Right. So when an ENTP focuses, are they better at FE?
Actually, I don't know. I find it a little more painfully aware when I'm focused. If anything, it makes it a little more effective, but a little unwieldy.
Okay. When you're focused on things outside of you, objective sensing, are you better at reading people's emotions when you're focused on a person? That makes sense, doesn't it?
Sorry, you're going a little robotic again.
Okay, I was just saying, do you think you're better at reading someone's emotions when you're actually concentrated on the person, rather than off in NE land?
I mean, yeah, that would make sense.
Yeah, because a lot of times...
I'm trying to think of times I'm not off in any land.
Yeah. Yeah, but I can see that though, right? NTPs can do that where they have a conversation with somebody and they're so busy thinking of the ideas in their head that their eyes are moving, like they're not there doing that eye accessing cues thing where they're moving this way and moving that way as they're thinking about things. They're not really reading the person to see for the feedback, whereas ENFP does do that. And so the ENFP will probably then comment on the fact, and they adjust more than the ENTP. So you can see how the FE is stronger in the ENFP, and how in general they're more charismatic. Right.
That makes sense. You don't know how many times an ego SC user has told me, "Why won't you look at me?"
There we go. There we go.
Why aren't you paying attention?
Right. So like I said, ModelG is, if you plug in your own definitions, so you can even plug in Nadia's definitions and it works. So again, this would be like, and Maria could back me up on this, like maybe this is like the super ego shift, because this is the super ego row of ENTP in Model A.
Mm-hmm.
Right, so this would be where they act like ESFP, where they're focused and they're charming as heck. Right.
You said who's acting like ESFP, ENFP, or ENTP? Was that
ENTP? Because this is the social mission block.
Okay.
Right. I mean I think that's more likely in females to act like that than males.
I would say so. I could see that.
Yeah, that's why I did that thing at the beginning about that guy.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the ENTPs and their dress sense, right? Now, Jonathan Ross even said that. Now, Jonathan Ross is ENTP, and he went into room 101, and he put his dress sense in room 101 because it was so bad. Right then, okay. So we got to get through these bullet points. So, Joe, let's go through this. So, what do you think of number 1.
Sorry, something's breaking up a lot.
Okay, I'll...
1 second.
Should be okay. I'll have a look at my...
No, I think it's Mr. INTP on the internet over there. There we go. That should be better. There we go.
Right, so that's your local INTP. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right, okay, here we go. So, going through these bullet points. Does number 1 strike you? Any comments on number 1 in NE+?
I mean, just mostly agreement. Any positive is one of those. It's kind of a duh thing for me, just because I sink so much into any positive.
Right.
It's all kind of like yes.
Right, so if we have a look down here, a bit of Victor's TI, extreme TI. Do you agree with that for the NE+ and NE-? Oh yeah, just a little bit of theory that Maria told me. The stronger a function is, the more you can use both charges of it. It's just that there's a natural preference for one over the other.
Yeah, I could see that. I agree with the differences for sure. There's I definitely spend a lot less time with alternatives. It's one of those, if you're so busy charging forward, there's no really room to be looking for negative space.
Mm.
It's not that I can't see it or I won't when it comes to any negative. It's just more, it seems unnecessary or like something to do if I don't have space for my any positive to work.
Now, when it says there that, so in Socionics, ENFP is a negativist, but they've got creative FE plus, and their overall demeanor and expressiveness might make people think, what? ENFPs are some of the most expressive, positive people. You know what I mean? So it's like you have to sort of like look at it a little bit differently. That's one of those dichotomies that's a little bit, yeah, maybe. With the charges, right? Okay, number 2. I'm gonna, yeah, I'll just put that in the middle of the screen like that. Then we know what we're talking about. So what about number 2?
Number 2. Yeah, also true, especially with striving to maintain broad perspectives. I think any positive is especially good at not keeping itself kind of tied to one area or like one point of view and kind of wants to see all sides of things.
Could you give us an example, Joe?
I'm trying to think of one. I mean, I don't have like a specific example, but just like if I'm trying to sort of create something, I do a lot of sort of home building projects with technology, and one of the biggest things I find I do that helps me is kind of figuring out sort of like what potential problems, like what kind of uses am I looking for in the future. Like thinking of everything that could, you know, it actually reminded me of the other page you had with the INTJs, and it was the contingency plans.
Yeah, that
and
was the Keirsey one.
That
yeah.
Because I've noticed that, because whenever I hear contingency plans, I always think how I've worked with higher NI users, you know, the ones who kind of have things, you know, those plans ready. But I've always found I'm good at setting up the situations that allow them to create those plans. You know, well, what if this and what if that? What if this all could happen? And how much do I need to encapsulate in a project before it becomes too much?
Right. So what you said there relates, but so like your creative function, why Victor switched it around, the strong TE. So you can see how it's using it together, even though you don't value it and probably find it a little bit boring. When you analyze it, you just do it. And again, even though you're in any subtype, oh, wait a minute, maybe you wouldn't do as much of it if you're the TI subtype. But because you like more of the subtype in the social mission block, maybe you do more of it. I don't know. Right, so which one are we on now? Oh, number 3.
Number 3. That definitely, I'd agree with that one. I mean, I kind of enjoy unusual situations, if anything. There's always that sort of weird pro-cataclysmic side that's always, you know, well, if something like this happened, you know, it might be kind of exciting. And there's sort of a pride, I think, that I take in coming up with unusual ideas or things that are sort of off the wall a little bit. It's kind of like a pride identity thing in a way.
So that is something that you would share all the EPs, so the NE and SE DOMs, like almost like cause a crisis in order to like rather than be bored, and then so they can react and adapt in a crisis. So number 4, are you extremely curious, Joe?
Yeah, I think at this point it's becoming, doesn't need to be answered if it's already this implicit, but yes, very.
What are you usually curious about?
Oceans. I like oceans. I like deep sea creatures. I'm always on the Reddit Thalassophobia subreddit. I like learning about like giant squids and things like that. And then I like learning about the different kinds of cameras that I'm going way off topic already. And then I like learning about lots of that. That's probably the thing I'm into right now. Otherwise, I've been really interested in programming and stuff, but I gotta stop. I'm gonna keep going.
I remember when we did with Jonathan, and like we weren't even at the bottom of the first page, and Jonathan said enough with this NE nonsense, and I just realised we're just only on the first square. Right, so number 5.
I realized that like 5 minutes in. I knew it would take this long.
Right, number 5.
Number 5. Oh yeah. I always find I try to explain how it's more of a this is how I could see it happening. I mean, at least I'm smart enough to sit there and say I don't actually have all the facts. This might be the possibility of what's happening, but I do like to try to explain things. It's a puzzle solving thing.
Yeah. What about number 6?
Potentially, when it comes to technology and things like that.
Right. That's a lot of NT points.
Yeah,
You gotta think that if a woman's into technology that much, and it's like, and it's new stuff rather than stuff for like productivity. Like if it's stuff for the novelty of it, you probably think that's probably an NT female in that case, and
Most
probably
likely.
an NTP. Whereas people of all types, like once it's become mainstream and it's a thing for like actually getting a practical thing done, then pretty much everyone's using a computer, even the SJs and stuff. But yeah, novelty. What about number 7?
I'd say it's pretty. I mean, I like trying new things and looking at new ideas. I do tend to kind of go back to and like rehash old things. I kind of like finding novelty within topics I've already explored. I think is more my favorite thing rather than just finding new topics.
Yeah, I like to do that as well. Like I said with ModelG, it's come up with like new stuff all the while because it's like you relate things in real life to the model, and it like sort of explains. It's amazing for doing that. What about number 8?
Yeah, and what good do things do if you're not doing it now or doing it in the near future? It's one of those. Achievement in general doesn't mean much to me. I mean, whether it's future or past.
But Joe, how about I was only able to see so far because I stood on the shoulders of giants?
Sorry?
I think it was Newton that said, I was only able to see so far because I stood on the shoulders of giants.
Oh, are you? Well, okay, that's actually a good differentiation. Personal past achievements or past achievements of others. I was thinking more personal achievement, like Enneagram 3 style. But no, others' past achievements, where do you get all your information? Where do you extrapolate from if you don't have that?
Oh, well, I assume it means that. I don't know. Now, I think that if it meant themselves, a lot of ENTPs would have a value for their past achievements and tell you about it. Right. Pushes radical idea. There we go. I mean, that fits with Keirsey's inventor. Are you old enough yet to have invented something, Joe? Do you have plans to invent something?
Not so much inventing. I'm not as much of a I'm definitely creative. I don't necessarily make things. I like to improve on rather than invent from scratch. I'm more of an optimizer in that way.
Oh.
I like coming up with things that can make existing processes better. Existing items have like better functions or new functions entirely. That's more. I like to add little things onto larger.
I'll just write here that Victor's written for NE. in his school, manifest in taking chances and defying convention. And I would say a little bit, but that can also be ascribed to extroverted sensor. Right, so we'll have a look at TE, a function that shows us active, obstinate, enduring behavior. Right, and then he's written it there as, people should be able to see that. Not much time left, so I'm gonna, people can see that. So T plus, ENTJ, they take more chances. ESTJ, TE minus, they'll do more of the logistical kind of businesses where it's like, just work really hard, have a small margin, traditional kind of business. So, I mean, something like Walmart, where you just do something simple really well. And that's how you, that's their view. Right, or, right, and then, okay, so these bullet points.
Number one for TE. It reminds me of sort of the ignoring aspect of DCNH. Only occupies himself with the activities that interest him. Very, very true, and I think it's interesting because it's usually TE valuers who always ask, like, what value is there in the things that you do? To which I respond, I have value in it myself, even if it's not necessarily shared by everyone else. But I thought that was very funny.
Right, I'll let you comment on any one you want from that list.
Yeah, that was the one that stood out to me the most. Practical use in projects. We'll see. We'll see how the talking mirror works out, and then I'll come back to you on that one.
The talking what?
Talking mirror. You know, the Raspberry Pi Magic Mirror projects, something like that, but I'm making it work with possibly a Microsoft or Xbox Kinect and the Amazon Echo. Well, we'll see how it goes. We'll see how it goes.
Hopefully using Linux on it. Right, anyway, that's a separate conversation. So, any other? No, go on.
Yeah, the optimization. I think actually that TE is what kind of kicked in with the NE and the number 9.
So you can see how your intuition really is directed outwards into the world, whereas mine is directed inwards and like finding connections between the theories and ideas for like writing things. So it's like, I mean, the closest that a lot of INTPs get to extroverting in terms of functions rather than socializing is to write it down on a piece of paper. To them, it's like, I've extroverted my thought into the external world or into a computer. Right then. So, social mission block. We'll go through these. Got to go through these bullet points. Oh, yeah. Energy. Energy. I've not talked about energy. Right. So, the blue columns have maximum energy. And in fact, it takes more than its lion's share. So you've probably seen a lot of people who overindulge their lead function and their auxiliary function. And you probably thought you should work on your other functions there. And then here it's got optimum energy. So, you know, people know what the word optimum means. And if you don't, look in a dictionary. So it uses just enough, the right amount of energy. And then we've got minimum energy. So it's the minimum to get it done. And then we've got, and when I saw the word pessimum, I thought, what a great word, Victor. It obviously means less than minimum. What a great word. I've never seen it used anywhere else.
Yeah, it works, especially when there's a few contexts minimum could be used, and it can be a little confusing.
Yep. Right, so I've got here SE. Responsible, and Maria helped with the translation, and we worked quite hard on getting the translation right for extroverted sensor on this, because like it's responsible for stimulation, aggression, build up, and release. So I'll let you pick the ones that you can identify with there.
Can't be strong-armed. I'd say that's a pretty apt one. If anything, it's less of pure stubbornness and almost more completely ignoring or not affected by.
I'll mention to the audience, you identify a 7-wing 8, so you'll probably have a little bit of extra, little bit more strong SE there. because SE is very close. Because Socionics SE is very close to 8.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the similar themes.
There's a little extra kick, and then number 5, especially because like I said, I don't know if I mentioned, but I'm an artist and an illustrator, and so that's one thing I've noticed is I'm pretty good at developing that sphere of influence, being able to get in contact with people in my field who might have influence, kind of being able to work with that and sort of collaborate with others easily, and kind of knowing where best to stake my interest to kind of maximize both there and my time.
And I've seen a little bit of Joe's artwork. It's actually technically very good. It's not like crappy modern art stuff. I'm a little bit hardcore because I like HR Giga, where I want tons of imagination and very good technique. I don't want something that looks like it could have been done by a 5-year-old. Right. So have you said all you want to say about extroverted sensor?
I think so. I know we don't have a ton of time, so I'm trying to be pretty brief with it.
Yeah, I'll just say that, so the role function, you can see how you can switch between NE and SE. That both of it is part of your Jungian temperament, or what I call mindset, because it's both of the EP functions. Right, so now we can talk about FE, and whether you agree with it or not, or whether it fits males more than females.
Number 1, I feel sorry for anybody who expresses interest in my knowledge and expertise, because they're going to get an earful about it. So yes, definitely. That's one of the things I don't consider myself very traditionally socially extroverted, but once someone tries to engage me on that level, that all kind of goes out the window. Yeah, direct and bluntness, 2 and 3 kind of go hand in hand. Not enough energy, like you said, pessimum. There's not enough energy to be able to do anything more with it most of the time.
Yeah. So you said there that once somebody expresses their interest and launches you, then you become expressive. Now, what about this bit here that sort of imply that, you know, it goes with the stereotype of the trolliness? Like if you look at number 5, like they want a bit of an argument, and then arguments, debates, and saying what's on his mind energizes him. But does that also apply to her, though? Does it also apply to the females?
Much. I wonder if that could. I'm not sure. I prefer to kind of ignore or dodge those kind of things. I mean, there are times when I will get a little trolly online. That's when I'm already in kind of a mood. It's a good way to blow off steam. But I'd rather avoid things like that, just because I think that a lot of that agitation just could be avoided, and I can work on other projects.
Very good.
I do think benefiting from the occasional crisis.
Right.
Very spot on.
Because I have a low opinion of that trolly behaviour. Right. So if we go to the internalities. All right. So we've got the rider-horse metaphor. Who was it who said that they liked that metaphor? I can't remember. Somebody said that they liked that metaphor.
Which one?
The metaphor of rider-horse for externalities, internalities.
Oh.
I can't remember who it was. So Victor's, it's like, so you've got this thing in Model G where you've got, when the person is directed towards society, so in their social mission, it's sort of suppressing the lower functions. And you can sort of see that with introverts, where you can see that their extroverted functions are suppressed, but once you get them in certain situations, they become more expressive. And so you would have the thing where in INTP, the TI is the rider and the NE is the horse. Now, I suppose Jonathan thinks that sometimes my horse throws off the rider. So the rider needs to get it under control and actually steer the NE horse. So that's the rider-horse metaphor. Right. Oh, yeah, so we've got it there. Indicated by down arrows, top functions suppress lower functions, but on its territory, the bottom functions are free from the control of the upper functions. Analogy rider-horse. Right. At close psychological distance, functions these 5 to 8, included in the bottom row, called internalities, which means they are aimed at its territory. When working externally, internalization is suppressed and muted by the vertical supervision. So people who know about socionics, if you look up the supervision ring, and these are all in a supervision ring. So for example, in fact, all of these are in a supervision ring. So for example, this is the supervisee, this is the supervisor, and I suppose, right, that one's going to be in the middle then, isn't it? That's going to be in the middle of those two, I think. We'll have to look at the other one. We've not got enough time to go through that. We'll have to get to the bullet points. Oh yes, the energy, for people those that know in socionics, this is in a benefit realm for energy. So we've got, if we've got TESE, TESE is the benefactor of ENTP. So with INTP, that would be NIFI, because you've got INFJ, IEI as the benefactor of the INTP. Now, we're going to probably do a hangout with Maria in future where we actually go through the levels of the benefit relationship, because it's some levels, one type's a benefactor and the other one's a beneficiary. And so it's like, I think Maria has said there's like a transfer of information from the INTP to the INFJ, and you can actually see that maybe repeated in this row, where if you had those types, there'd be a transfer of information, and that's sort of repeated in the model. So Victor, just like David Mark Keirsey, does this thing of repeating the same system being repeated at a larger and larger level. Right, let's get to the bullet points. Right, self-affirmation block. So for me, this is acting like, well, as Maria said, this is like when the person is on their territory, like INTP gets more expressive as you just described. So does your INTP act a little bit like an ENFP when he's on his territory? Or have some qualities of ENFP?
I don't know. I couldn't see F, but I could definitely see a more ENTP-ish than ENFP.
Right, okay. But what it would be for the theory would be that they just get a little bit more expressive. So it's like they get the NE and they start talking about the ideas. Once they start talking about the ideas, like me in this hangout, they get more expressive. So you get the NE and FE in a block. So which if we go through,
it did pick up a little bit.
Oh, you want me to zoom in a little bit or move it up? Sorry, what did you say?
Oh, that's fine. I can read it well.
Okay.
Be mindful of time. Go ahead.
I'll just need to zoom in for people. I'll just let them see this. Now look at how Victor's put a little bit of a dig in there.
Just a bit. Relax into alternatives versus stubbornly following your principles.
Yeah, and it says that is the logic of information socionics as well as the structural logic of LSI. And then at the bottom, this is the logic of energy synergistic socionics, i.e. his school, and kind of structural logic characteristic of LII. Right. Right, and this is going to be SI, and then just so people can see this, people can pause that, take it in themselves, because we only have a certain amount of time left. So we're going to try and get through these bullet points. Right, so, right. Any of those in TI plus, Joe, that stand out to you?
Most of them. The biggest one that stands out is number 5. It's kind of fun with any dominance. It's kind of like you have an ever-shifting sort of working model. Like you could compare it to like a spider web or something like that, where whenever you have new information coming in, it's always being evaluated, although not as strictly, I guess, as an INTP. But there's that constant spread of like, now this is here, you have to recheck everything else that's going on, but it's kind of a background process.
So So Joe, you told me something in a private message about a subject that you were doing, but that you were struggled with. Like, do you want to talk about that? And I sort of like gave it as an example of sometimes NTPs think that they can NE it, like understand something quickly because they can relate it to something they already know. Do you think that was the problem with what you were learning, where you couldn't NE it, and so you found it challenging, that thing? I don't know if you want to mention it or not. That thing that you were that you struggled with.
I don't remember what I was learning. I don't.
I'll
assume I have more memory than I do.
I'll type it outside the. Oh, there. I'll write it in there.
Sorry?
That thing. I've written it in the side in the chat.
Oh, computing.
Yeah.
Oh, not so much that. That was more of a external issues. Kind of made it hard for me to keep up with my work. Although I definitely did have a little overconfidence. More, I went through an easy subject my first degree, so my second with a harder subject was a little more.
Right. So so is your normal approach to understand something by finding connections with what you already know?
No, definitely. Yeah, I mean, everything's always being related to, have I done it before? Have it like, what is it like this? What's different? What's the same? How can I apply this? Take and leave, kind of what's happened in the past.
So what I would say is, in a classroom, if you're presenting a new subject, the NTPs will probably be like the first to understand it, if they can make a connection to what they already know.
I found I will lag, and then once something clicks and everything comes into place, then I will launch ahead, sort of. Yeah,
because like you get it in a structure.
It is. It's like a circuit.
It's like me with ModelG. Once you've got the structure, then you can like. I'm not very good at all with Enneagram. Jonathan is miles ahead of me with Enneagram because it's like hard to fit it into a structure for me. Mm-hmm. Jonathan may have just nodded there. So, what about the SI, the SI box?
SI, good appetite. Oh, I wish.
Well,
I will say number 7, easy to maintain clothing. My ESTP mother is distraught at how little I vary my wardrobe and how unstylish I am.
Well, compared to the guy at the beginning, that ENTP. But why do you wish you had a bigger appetite? There's loads of people out there who wish they didn't have a bigger appetite.
I don't know. I forget to eat a lot. I get so drawn into whatever I'm doing that I just kind of don't. I forget to have food or sleep. I'll go, I mean, for ages, and I'll realize I've been sitting there for 12 hours at a computer or a canvas or something. So in general, it's not appetite, it's just general regulation.
So what you've just done there is you have validated almost the SOCIONICS definition of SI and all like the internal bodily harmony and stuff like that. Because trying to define SI really is difficult because there's like 3 different strands to it that we won't really go into now. So any of those, have I asked this already? I think I might have. Do you want to comment on any of the others?
I mean, really, just I think most of it. I do like convenient routines and things like that. A lot of the things, especially that are very like physical in terms of like food and sleep and things like that. I do like having routine. I do like eating the same things. I like to not have to think about it. It's kind of what it is. It's comfortable to not have to consider it. It's very draining when I have to, but.
Right. Do you think you growing up in the South has made you care more about your appearance than, say, a male ENTP?
Oh, I don't think I care enough about my appearance sometimes, but it could be. I don't know if it's as much Southern, but I guess that's part of the influence. And then my parents are very appearance oriented, so it's always kind of learn how to present yourself. More for the purpose of, people will respect you, people will take your ideas seriously. But to me, it's more if my ideas don't have enough merit to be taken seriously without looking nice, then are they really that good of ideas?
Yeah. Because Dizzy Dolly has talked about on her YouTube channel and she talks about having Asperger's, and she said that she can keep up this Southern nice FE thing for about half an hour. When she said that as a young girl, she was like trained to like do all that. Hello, hi, my name, like do all that FE stuff. And I wondered, did you have like a similar experience where like
they tried their best. They did. I wasn't cooperative with it. So
we have now the inflation avoidance block. And Dario and I love the fact, because Dario and I are both libertarians, that Victor put this in. Overvoltage on this block leads to collapse of the mind, just as monetary inflation leads to collapse of the economy.
Subtle.
Yes, but you see, the thing is, though, I know they had very high inflation in Russia. They might have also had it in Ukraine as well. I'm not sure. Right, here we go. So let's... Now then, here we go. This is where I don't know if... No, here we go. Fi plus. I'll try and get it to zoom in. Oh, okay. I'll go to the bottom. Right. So bear in mind, folks, that Victor's definition of an ESI is like a hardcore moral crusader type person. Well, in terms of like somebody standing up for their morals, yet also at the same time not wanting to take risks. So it's a little bit of a odd profile, in my opinion. Right, I'll let you take that in. Right. Now we'll get onto the bullet points because we've only got about 10 minutes left, I'm sure. Joe?
Yeah, I mean, I'll make sure we can get through them. I'm not going to take off in the middle of FI.
Oh, excellent! So you've got good FI
I
there.
won't do that to you. I won't do that to you because I care. I will at least get through the bullet points of NI before I have to pop out.
So there you see, folks, because you actually said that you quite admire FI in other people. Whereas usually the ENTP has the thing of, well, I usually spread this about them, not exactly the most loyal of people. And same with ESTP, the FI break. Because it's like the EP thing, like, wants to take advantage of the situation. And of course, ESTP wants to be expedient.
Opportunists.
Yes. And if they see a better opportunity, then they want to switch to it. Right, so what about these ones in the FI plus box?
I'd say 1 and 2 are the ones that stand out to be the most. I think they both work with psychological distance. Yeah, I'm not very weary of it. It's hard for me to make friends and determine what level of friendship we're at. You know, it's kind of on or off. It's almost binary. If someone is close enough to be considered my friend, then, you know, there goes that loyalty and close distance. And if they're not, then suddenly there's no closeness, really. It's hard to kind of find a good middle ground just because I don't know where to hold somebody.
I think there may be a difference here between males and females, especially with number 1, because females get to learn, you know what I mean, not to be, so they don't want the guy to misunderstand. Do you think that's a thing?
I think it is. It may depend on the way one's socialized. I raise in a lot of T-types in my family, so I may not have quite the same socialization. Yeah. But I could definitely see there being a difference there, or at least men tend to be a little more radical, I guess, with it. I'd say straightforward to the point of being inconsiderate, not usually on purpose, but it definitely happens. And then hard to give moral support and comfort others. I tend to go utilitarian with that. If something bad is happening, it's what can I offer you as a material support? Can I give you food, water? Or sometimes if I'm in desperation, what do you need to hear? But otherwise, it doesn't go very well beyond that.
That's very T of you. So the creative
it's what I learned growing up.
Right. Do you think 6 applies more to male than females? Males.
There's a sense of entitlement there. I think with sometimes women, there might be, depending on where you grow up and with who, there's sort of you have to learn to earn your spot, and so I think that might be a little less prominent with women and ENTPs.
Joe, do you think you've got 3 in your tri-type?
Sorry?
Do you think you've got 3 in your Enneagram tri-type?
I think it's been I think it was 738, if I recall correctly. It was a long time ago, though. I never got that into Enneagram, but I liked it.
The reason why is usually people who say a lot of TE things, and like concentrate on TE things, there's like, for me, there's a big connection between TE and 3, because it's like practical thinking towards goals and success. So it makes me think, oh, the person may at least have a 3 in their tri-type, unless they then start talking about like helpery type things or creative look at me type of individualistic things. So even though you are artistic, you score higher on the 3 than the 4.
That's actually one thing that's separated me from a lot of artists growing up, especially a lot of like the FP artists. There's a lot of them in the artistic community, and there's never been that sense of like sort of expression identity within art. It's almost always been sort of how well can I do it? How good can I make it look? How do I execute? And then can I convey the ideas that I want to convey rather than anything else rather than any 4 qualities to it.
I actually have a great book for people, and people might think, oh, what a dumb book. But Understanding Comics is a great book because it goes through the history of art and then relates it to wait a minute, I've got a great graphic in here. Let's just do. Will it be in here? I've got to get on this. All right, we've got the. Oh, here we go. So we've got the triangle between. You've got more realistic in that corner.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the top corner, you've got the picture plane where it becomes like more abstract and a bit weird. And then in the other corner is where it gets more like simplified.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a
theory,
theory,
interesting.
and there's a theory here that children respond more to cartoons because the faces are simplified with like simplified expressions.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know if that's necessarily true, or whether it may depend on type. Maybe like the young feelery type children want to see a human face rather than a cartoony face. So there's like lots of stuff, and then stuff there on Japanese, on how Japanese manga is different, like how it would show like the perception of speed, things like that. So it's a
That's
very good book.
interesting, actually.
And
I need to get hold of that.
This book has amazing reviews, and you got Matt Groening on the back. And people know who Matt Groening is, or they should know who he is.
Wow.
Right then. So very high reviews on that. So what about number 7?
7. Yeah, I took a quiz recently, something about like political and economical values. But one of the things I noticed, I scored highest on is progressiveness, as in I really do disregard. I think tradition for the sake of tradition is almost worthless. But I don't say I'd feel hurt too much if it's brought to my attention. I can't bring myself to care.
But if a tradition is good, say like the Constitution, I mean, if people actually stuck to it, it would be good. But
that's why I said for the sake of tradition. If there's a reason to stick to it, then by all means, if it makes sense. But yeah, if it's just because we've been doing it a long time, I think that's idiotic. But
yeah, and
I try not to be that harsh.
And that's a general thing of NTs, where Keirsey would have it like the SPs and the NTs are utilitarian or adaptive, and the SJs and NFs are cooperative. Although sometimes with the NFs, it's like they want everybody else to get with their program. Right, so the NI... Oh, well, I've got to say something about the break function. The weakest function overall, John Beebe, he had that silly model where it's like you just have like the MBTI functions across. And so it's like... Oh, dear. So for ENTP, NE, TI, FE, SI, and then at the bottom you would have NI,
the shadow function,
TE, FI, SE. And so he would have SE as the weakest function because it was in the bottom right. And I'm saying that is an example of TI gone wrong. And because it's like it's weakest because it's in the bottom right corner of the model. So, and then I was like going through it and said, so like we said with you, you're quite good at extroverted. In fact, you're probably better at extroverted sensing than the average ENTP. So, like 7 wing 8. So, and you would probably say that you're better at extroverted sensing than FI.
Yeah, definitely I'd say so.
Right. And that's the case in most ENTPs, where they will stand up for themselves and have an argument. Even when people push back and say you're immoral, they will then like argue it again so they can stand up for themselves when they're trolling.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Control function.
Ah.
This is one where you have a load of information for it. So INTP is always thinking about TE stuff, and Carl Jung actually wrote about it as, because he was writing about the TI DOM, and he said that there is an accompaniment, it's very hard for me to say that word, of extroverted thinking. So this process that runs in the background. And I'm looking at it and going, oh, that's the origin of the SOCIONICS control function. And he talks about how the TE DOM has an accompaniment of TI running in the background. Because if they didn't, the TE DOM would be like just fixated on the facts and not know what to do with the facts. And an INTP, right, okay, Jonathan, and the INTP that just had TI and no TE, they wouldn't be able to find any practical use or apply it to reality, and they'd fly off into the sky of ideas. So that's the control function.
Yeah.
And because you're going to give me a little bit of time, although not too much time, I will actually show you a little bit of theory on this block. Right, okay, here we go. Inflation avoidance block. If you can see that. There. Now, there's a little bit here where Maria translated this, and we didn't really quite know what it means. Like when it said the function that is created, the one a person should create almost from scratch in order to survive. And the closest example I could give is that for INTP, because they've got that NI going there, and the NI is thinking about the consequences all the while, then that NI is going to stop the person from acting in the moment. Because it's like, don't do that, you'll die. And so we can't do the extroverted sensor thing. Or like, we imagine what would happen if we confronted somebody, and maybe because and so it's like, oh, don't do that, it could escalate. So we have a fear of escalation. And so we have this, and so what it does is it stops us from acting in the moment. It stops us from being impulsive, but it also stops us from acting in the moment and taking advantage of opportunities. If it's like in a pressurized situation. If it's a detached situation and it's like any opportunities, then we're a little bit better. Right. So does that make sense for the 8? And there's the idea that it can coach your Joule because you've got high information for it. And also there's the idea that people with this function will tell other people about this, but not do it themselves. So for example, INTPs will, like me, will have Peter Schiff on the wall and know about economics and stuff, but not necessarily be a stockbroker. And they will tell other people about the theories. Right, and so we'll go to the actual
the bullet point.
The bullet points. Oh yeah.
Okay, I would consider NI one of my weakest functions overall.
Why do you think that is?
Because to be honest, I mean, I'm close friends with an INTJ, and just no matter what I read or what I try to learn, it just doesn't make sense. And most of the the iterations I see here seem to be mostly sort of forms of failures or like lapses, which is what I identify with most. I see my lack of proper NI more so than positive use of it.
Yeah, it's especially difficult when we don't really know what it is. Apart from intuition of time. And again, we probably think, so when people say intuition of time, do you just think that's causality? I've worked that out with my TI. It's
the causality in a form of extrapolation is the best I can do with it. I can figure it out on a technical level, like the definition, but right. I can't. It doesn't compute. The circuits don't light up. But I'd say for number 1, I have ADHD, so this actually a lot of this coincides being late in schedules.
Yeah, I think well. Oh, what I can say about NI, I think they have a feeling that something's right or something's going to happen, but without being able to articulate it on a logical level. And then maybe the INTJs can articulate, but it's like it's going to be in the unconscious first. And of course, in Jung's original theory, it's the mechanism of NI, how it works is because the NI DOM has connections with the archetypes, and the archetypes are representations of universal facts, and because they're in contact with those universals, they can predict the future. I can give you a parallel situation. Because I understand the fundamentals of Austrian school economics, or at least enough of them, I'm able to predict the economic future along. And because I like listening to Peter Schiff, because we understand the fundamentals. And so that's the idea that with the archetypes, these are these weird fundamentals that exist in the collective unconscious, which is why
I've got to cut in and be a little rude. I've got maybe a couple more minutes before I
here we go.
leave.
NI minus. Control NI minus. The floor is yours.
We're gonna have to blow through this one. Yeah, more often than not I'm late to events, even if they're scheduled, even if I have it written down. Something gets in the way. Something doesn't go as planned. Right hand in hand with that, number 4, being focused on train of thought goes absent-minded. I'm always misplacing small objects because when I'm actually doing things, especially like minute or mundane things around the house, my brain's off elsewhere, like doing any things. So as a result, I don't know where things go. Things end up in vases or under things and cushions, and I don't know where they get there or how they come here. I can't say I identify with looking out for dangers and mistakes. I might be able to come up with, like I said earlier, coming up with potential ideas where something could go wrong, but I'm not very good at figuring out when something will go wrong.
I think I didn't show this at the bottom. There we go.
Mm-hmm.
It actually fits what Keirsey, the way he described it, like the INTJ were like looking for how things will go wrong, the entailment management of like, if this goes wrong, we've got to do this and this, contingency planning.
Mm-hmm. And I'm good at helping others with the contingency planning, but it's just so hard to see what's the actual likely play of events. I'm better at coming up with sort of, off base ideas and kind of I can give you 1,000 scenarios, but I couldn't tell you which one's more likely.
Yeah,
so
that's one of the things.
I need an eye for that.
That's the problem with NE is like you can't concentrate on one thing. Why can't you concentrate on one thing? Because we have 10 million different ideas. That's why. And I'll just tell people, and I'll finish with one thing. So I will go off with this, and I will say, in the Kersey INTP profile, it says, if an organization is to get the most out of an INTP, they must supply him with or her with an efficient support staff in order to capture the ideas as they emerge. And then when it describes the INTJ, it says every idea is subjected to the test of usefulness. And then it also mentions all the NI stuff. So the Kersey INTP architect is definitely LII, and the Kersey INTJ mastermind is definitely II. And my clinching proof is the INTP profile in Kersey is based on David Kersey Jr., and Victor typed him as LII. There we go.
There you go.
So, Joe, how was that for you? Did it help explain things?
That was illuminating.
Right then, so folks, on that fantastic approval, I'll now end the hangout.
All right.